Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to one of the April's city bird seminars. And today we have Dr. Lauren Van Scoy from Penn State speaking to us about qualitative research and using AI on qualitative research. But before I hand it over to her, I wanted to remind everyone that this Zoom session will be recorded. And if you're a registered participant, you will receive the link to the recording as well as a copy of Dr. Vanskoy's slides. And you are muted while you're entering the Zoom room. But if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat window, and I'll be happy to let Dr. Vanskoy know that there are questions. And so without further ado, again, thank you, Dr. Vanskoy, for agreeing to give us the talk about an interesting, well, I'm looking forward to the talk because it's a completely new idea for me as well. Without further ado, please take away.
All right, well, thank you. Let me share my screen. All right, so I hate it when I go to screen share because then I can't see faces, but that's okay. So feel free to interrupt. Let me get us onto view. Slideshow, play from start. Okay, so my name is LJ Van Scoy. I'm one of the associate directors at CTSI and PI for the KL2 program at the CTSI, and I direct the Mixed Methods Research course in Public Health Sciences. And I am excited to talk to everyone today about, can we use AI for our qualitative analysis, which is like the number 1, 2, and 3 question that I get when I'm meeting with researchers. I do a lot of qualitative consultations, and also in my own work, I have this question. So this talk, it's funny, I was thinking about this last night and I was like, I need to perfect this talk and I need to get images. It needs to be a really good talk. But then I thought, you know what, this talk is going to be obsolete in about 3 months. So I think that's really important to keep in mind, particularly for those of you that may view this on the web, like in a year from now. I know that our CTSI YouTube channel gets a lot of hits. So I wanted to emphasize that this is what we know now from the literature review that I have done. And this is all rapidly changing, as we know, in the Wild West world of AI, which is very exciting. I have the talk broken down into 3 sections. The first is to make sure that we're all on the same page about what we mean by human qualitative coding. I would like to make sure that everyone understands what humans do before we start talking about what AI can do. I think that's probably, quite frankly, the most important part of the talk. But then the second and third part is, how can AI help us? And we're going to look specifically at some of the AI assist tools that have been embedded in current software. Our lab typically only uses Max QDA, so that's what I'm going to focus on. But a bulk of what I'm going to talk about is a lit review for looking at the way ChatGPT in particular has been used for codebooks and coding. I'm going to talk really briefly about Aqua, which is an automated qualitative assistant paper that I was lucky enough to be a co-author on some automated qualitative AI work years ago. That was clearly way ahead of its time. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the pros and cons of using AI. And I think that's the part that most of you are going to be most interested in honing in on, is sort of the ending. My disclosures, I'm funded by the NIH. I am not an AI expert, but I am an end user, and I've spent a lot of time exploring AI in a variety of different ways, including qualitative research, and have been more recently studying ways that we can use AI for qualitative research. I hope that most of you here know what qualitative data is, but just to be sure, I want to make sure that we distinguish qualitative from quantitative. As you all know, quantitative data is our favorite kind of data, or maybe some of our favorite kind of data: numbers, questionnaires, scales, EMR data, all of those kinds of things. And our research questions in quantitative data is about causality. How much? Can we prove, with a p-value, a hypothesis? We look for associations and correlations and linear relationships. But in qualitative data, our data is very different. In qualitative, our data comes in the forms of words, audio, video, observations, lots of different ways. It can be art. And our research questions in qualitative are different as well. And that includes questions not so much about how much or how is A related to B, but more about how or why does something happen. So we're more interested in processes, and our research questions are open-ended in nature. And our goals here are to generate meaning, to understand or contextualize a phenomenon, or to pursue opinions or perceptions. And what's really important for everyone to know, and that's why I'm focusing the first part of this on what is human coding, is that it's very rigorous and it's systematic and there is a process. It's not willy-nilly. It's not just, I'm reading a bunch of stuff and summarizing it, but we have a process that we go through. And the results that come out are descriptive themes or conceptual models or whatever your methodology is there for. So what exactly do I mean when I say human qualitative coding? So this is our process that we do. This little thing with the waiting room is so distracting. I wish I could move it, but I can't. Okay. Um, all right, so we're going to talk mainly here about content or thematic analysis using an inductive approach. And I'm not going to go into details about what these are, but suffice to say that most of the qualitative research that goes on at Penn State Health is falling into the category of content or thematic analysis, where we're reading interviews, blogs, survey data, open-ended responses, whatever it may be, and trying to summarize and describe the content of the interviews and draw conclusions or interpretations about the themes that emerge from those data. And so the way that we go ahead and analyze it, you now have, I'm going to jump right to the point where you have your data. So we're not going to talk about all the other awesome stuff about qualitative, but you have a list of data in front of you and you've got transcripts. And so the way that a human would go through an analysis is first you read the data. So you read, 20, 30% of the data. You're not going to be able to read all of it, maybe. And what we have our analysts do is we have them just jot down their notes of what they're hearing in the data. So for example, if I'm analyzing an intervention and I want to know people's opinions or perceptions or their experience with an intervention, they may have positive experiences. I liked the timing of it. I liked the duration. I liked the format. I didn't like how long it took. I didn't like this. And they start to have these little like nuggets of information, sometimes called meaning units or codes that come out of the data. And we just write this long laundry list on the side. Usually we do on the margin of the transcript, right? Or on a whiteboard, and just say, okay, here's the things that are coming out. These are the topics that I'm seeing. And after you read, one transcript, you may have 10 codes come out. And then you read your second transcript and you get another 10 codes come out. And then you read your third transcript and you're like, okay, I've got most of these, but oh, here's 5 new ones. And then after a while, you're going to get to the point where you pretty much have all of them. I mean, maybe there's 1 or 2 stragglers coming out, but for the most part, you're going to hit the point of data saturation where no new codes are occurring. And that's when you know that you're ready to move on to the next phase, which is creating categories. And so what this is where we take all of the codes that are listed, that were just sort of sticky notes all over your paper, all over your whiteboard, and we organize them into clusters or buckets into what we call a code book, which I'll show you in a slide. And from the code book, you might group all the, positive impressions in one category and all the negative impressions in this and all the things that are stressors or all the things that are coping mechanisms or whatever it may be. You develop your code book, and then coders will use that code book to then assign a code from the category into a very specific part of the data. And then once you have all of your codes, and I will show you this, we review the codes looking at similarities and differences amongst the different categories and buckets to find themes that are existing within the buckets. So that's the big broad overview, and it sounds like a lot of work. And spoiler alert, it is a lot of work. And so the question that we have for this talk is, can AI help us and or replace us? So this is an example of a code book. You can the little grid thing here. So you can see these are, I kind of made this up. This is based on some early work, but the categories, positive impressions, EOL stands for end of life. This is like an intervention, an end of life conversation game that I do research on. And in a lot of our qualitative data, we ask people, what did you think of the game? Or how does it affect the way that you think about advanced care planning or thinking about end of life issues? And people will say, oh, it's thought provoking, new knowledge, la, la, la. And so you have all these codes. And then the humans will write a definition, which is, supposed to be a rich, thick definition that really describes what someone would mean when they mean it's thought provoking or what new knowledge actually means. And then some examples. And so once you have your code book, generally 2 human coders will apply that code book to about 20% of the data. So if you have 20 transcripts, then you would go with 4 transcripts, and you'd have coders code them, and I'm going to show you in a moment. And once they've done the coding, you have coder 1 and coder 2 to get together and run a statistic called a kappa, where they say, okay, I coded this piece of data here and you coded it there. Did we code the same data the same way? Did you have a different code than I did? And if so, why? And they calibrate, or they discuss iteratively, why they picked one versus the other, why this code fits, but this one doesn't. And maybe it's that the code book isn't good, and then they have to fix the code book. And so that is an iterative process that occurs with human thought and interpretation. And then once you've gotten your second version of your code book, oftentimes we'll go to a second part of the data, so another 20%, do the same process again, have them code it, have them run their kappa, look for places where they agree and they disagreed, so on and so forth until they get to the end of the data where they can review the codes and the patterns. So this is what it looks like in software. This is MaxQDA software. On your screen in the top left, I don't know, can you guys see my my arrow if I'm pointing? Okay, good. Up here, these are transcripts. So 808 is a transcript, 807 is a transcript, 648. These are one-on-one interviews. So participant number 808, participant number 807, participant number 648. And then down here is our code book. This is from, I can't even remember what data this is. I think this is Alzheimer's data, but this is data about people, thoughts on Project Talk events. So this is the code book that we had created. And you can see these numbers here where people, aka our coders, started to drag and drop snippets of code or of transcripts into the appropriate code. So here again is the participant file. This thing here is your code book. And this, by the way, this whole text that you see over here, is the Zoom thing in the way for you? It is? Okay. How do I get rid of that? There it is. Okay, there we go. So this is the transcript of participant number 648. If I were to double click on this, this is the transcript, and I can scroll up and down in the transcript. It looks good. Okay, good. Thank you. So this is the transcript. And so what I'm showing here in this purple highlight is that a coder is selecting this piece of text, this little passage, so to speak, and they can drag and drop it straight into the code book. And you can see that there were 62 places that people had just very broad positive thoughts about the event. So it wasn't specific, but just like, oh, I liked it. It was good, whatever. And by the way, I made this up. I don't know if this is the right thing to the right code. So no judging on that. So we manually read the thing, and the coder drags and drops every piece of text. Now they may take a whole passage, they may take a phrase, they may take the whole thing. What the human does is the human interprets the context of the conversation that's happening and puts it into the right bucket. And the thing about software that's really nice, and the reason we want to be able to see exactly where our codes are, is that we can look across, we can use these different visualization tools. I like the Code Matrix browser because it can show me sort of how common this one particular code, so thought-provoking, you can see almost every participant talked about it. So if I look across all of these different transcripts had that particular code. So I can tell that that's a theme, and that's a place I want to take a deeper look to see with more detail, what do they mean when they say thought-provoking? Versus you could look up and down, like this participant number 807 is an outlier, right? He didn't talk about any of these positive codes. This code book probably goes all the way down to, 14 different codes. So he or she is probably talking about something else, but they sure aren't talking about positive effects of the event. So this is somebody that looks a little bit different than 644, 648, and 414. So I may be interested in looking at them and their characteristics and what did they say and that kind of thing. So this visualization tool is really helpful. And when you double click on it, you can actually go straight in and read their quotes, which is a really important feature of coding in software. So all of this to say is what makes for rigorous qualitative data, and to pull it back into AI is, can AI replace that big, long process that I just described? And the way that we use our software, the way that we come to our findings and our conclusions. So some of the things, not all, but some of the things that make for rigorous qualitative data is that we have multiple perspectives, which is why we often have multiple coders, the PI, different co-investigators all looking at the data and interpreting it. We calculate inter-rater reliability to make sure that the coders are coding the same thing the same way. We check context and confirm coding. So we make sure that if a code is assigned to a piece of text, that it makes sense and that it's not taken out of context. We provide rich description, meaning, really, really diving in and describing what's happening in the data, the depth of coding, and also having audit trails. So making sure that we can see, um, uh, what we've done with our coding. So that is the human process. Are there any questions before I move on to the next section? All right.
Lauren, can I ask a clarification question?
Yes, you can.
For the coding matrix, the bubbles that you have in the visualization, does the
Yeah.
colors and the size of the bubble mean something?
It does. Yes. Thank you for pointing that out. You can make it square, you can make it round. I forget what the color is actually. I'm blanking as to what the colors mean at this moment, but the bigger the bubble, the more times that code showed up. So 808 talked about it being thought-provoking multiple times within their transcript, and 331 was just like lots of positives about the event. So this also, I can't click on it now, but it could be, if I could click it to make it numbers to show how many times, frequencies of those codes. Yeah. Okay, so how can AI help? And it's really important to know that when we say AI, we are not all talking about the same thing. So there are different approaches to AI. I'm going to talk about two of them today. The first I'm going to talk about is AI Assist, which are the tools that are already embedded within your software packages in your qualitative software. But I think the thing that most people are interested in and thinking about when they ask, can't AI just do this for us, is ChatGPT. And that's where I'm going to spend the time diving into the literature a little bit. But first, I want to show you what already exists out there in MaxQDA, that software. And these features are already embedded that you're able to use to help you augment your analysis. And I am not paid by MaxQDA, and I honestly don't use it that often for reasons that we'll talk about later. But I'm going to show you three of my favorite features, or three of, I should say, the sexiest features, right, of MaxQDA. And this is called AI Assist. Okay, so the question that we get is, well, can it just code my data? And the answer is sort of. So you can go in, you can upload your transcripts into MaxQDA and ask AI to suggest codes. So it'll read the transcript and it'll do what we talked about throwing it all on the whiteboard. What are the things that I'm seeing come out? AI can do that. The problem with that is that you have to upload each thing one at a time. Like it won't go through your whole data set and just give you a list of codes. You have to manually go through and drag and drop. And the reason, by the way, that MaxQDA did this, and I know this because I've spoken with a couple different consultants and people that work with MaxQDA, or for MaxQDA as consultants, is that they want to make sure that the data analysis stays in the hands of the human because, and I agree with them, I think that I'm sort of getting to the end here, but AI is a really great augmenting tool, but it's not yet ready for, push a button and have it do your analysis for you. And that's the danger of this. And so that's why MaxQDA has really taken a very conservative approach in that they give you the tools, but they also when you're using them, you have to do a lot of manual work. It's not click a button and you're done. So for example, this is a code here. So this is a document. This is a transcript of a focus group from a Alzheimer's disease group of caregivers for patients with Alzheimer's disease that had done an intervention about advanced care planning and end-of-life issues. And so AI suggested this code for me. It said, uncertain nature of the timing of disease. That was a code that AI came up with. And so I had asked AI, can you give me a list of codes? And this is the definition that it came up with. Mentions of the progression of the disease being unknown, not sure how much time they have left, etc. So then when I click OK, it goes through this one document and it looks through the document and it says, okay, I'm going to look for all the instances where this code emerged. And it found one coded segment. I see a hand raised, so I'll stop for a second. Go ahead, Tim.
Hey, sorry to interrupt there. Are there privacy issues we have to worry about with uploading something like that to MaxQDA?
Yeah,
Or
absolutely.
like IRB issues?
Yep, great question. So all of our transcripts are de-identified. So once you're de-identified, you're safe. I will say that I am in the process of figuring out what the institutional policy is regarding level 1, level 2 data and all of those things. But what I do know is that in my field, social science, which is, low risk, minimal risk research, as long as it's de-identified, it's safe. But you do have to be very aware that, yes, the data that you're putting up there is put into a cloud. And so I do tend to go with cyber and, send them an email and say, hey, this is what I'm looking to do. I don't want to speak much more than that because I don't want, they're my understandings, but I don't want to say something wrong. But I can tell you that if you de-identify it and it's low risk groups, they have said to me, yes, you can go ahead and use it in that way.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so here's the thing. So this looks great. It gave me a code, it found a place, so I'm going to go look at it. So now I go in here and I look, and you can see it says AI, and it shows me why and where. Thank you for putting the AI guidelines on there, showing me exactly, the section, and it's this whole section it highlighted, this blue bar here of. It says this segment explicitly mentions the uncertainty about how much time the participant, has left, the unpredictable nature of the disease progression, meaning Alzheimer's disease, which directly matches the code definition. That, by the way, AI generated from this specific transcript. So of course it matches the code definition, right? But here's the thing. AI created this code of uncertain nature of timing of the disease. And if you look at this, you go, oh, that's a perfect code. But my research question is, how did the intervention impact participants' views of advanced care planning? And so now let's read the whole passage. So interviewee 3 says, the intervention, it made me realize that I still have lots to do to get ready, even though I have lots of time. Yeah, that's just it. We don't know if we have lots of time. I mean, I'm hoping I have lots of time, but the progression of the disease, it's so capricious. How do I know? Or something outside the disease. So when the humans coded this, they appropriately coded it for that the Alzheimer's highlights the importance of advanced care planning. And do you see how that's different than what the AI came up with? Because the AI interpreted it verbatim as to they're uncertain about the disease. But that has nothing to do with what we're talking about, the overall context of this interview and this passage that they're talking about, where they're talking about how the intervention impacts them with the way they think about advanced care planning. So it can do these things, it can code these things, but when you look and review the codes, I'm not convinced that it's really going to get me what I need. It's certainly not going to answer my research question, well, at least in this case. And by the way, this was the first code I tried I was like, let me just see what I can come up with. And it proved my point exactly on my first pass. So yeah. Okay, this feature I do really, really like, which is using codes that humans have derived and asking AI to create summaries. And and for those of you that do qualitative analysis, you know that this is how we come up with our themes. So you can go in and the human will read all of the passages, all of the coding, and it'll come up with you in your head, you come up with a summary or a theme describing the data. And so AI can do that for you by you just click on it, you right click, summarize the coded statements, and it gives you a nice little paragraph. And I found these paragraphs to be pretty helpful. All right, so that's a thing I do really like. And then the last feature just to share, and I want to move on. So is you can chat with your documents. And it took me a while to understand what that meant. But essentially, what I've done here is I've uploaded a document. And I asked a question of the AI assist, what was the overall perspective of the group? And so it spits out this paragraph for me, but what I really like is that it gives me numbers at the ends. It gives me the line numbers of the transcript so I can go back and read exactly. I'm doing a talk. Sorry, kids are home from school. And so I can sort of check the work that the AI did. And then you can go in and say, well, what do you mean by this? And you can have like a conversation with it and it can give you more information in that way. All right, so that is AI Assist. But what I want to move on to is ChatGPT and generative AI, where it's like, yeah, that's all well and good, but it still is a lot of work. So why can't ChatGPT just do this for me? And so, go ahead.
Before you move on, I think there are a few comments. I don't know whether it's easier for you to address them before you start the news section.
Okay, let me take a quick peek. Privacy issues I did, there's the thing.
Oh, it's actually not a question. It's about comment on the IRB, so I guess we're good.
It seems like you would want to declare in your IRB proposal that you would be using AI during analysis. Yeah, absolutely. You would want to definitely put this into your IRB, talk with them about it. The IRB actually won't, they won't be the ones to address it. It will trigger an ancillary review to cyber. So I usually just bypass that and go straight to cyber. And then by the time I've gotten to my IRB, they just like check the box. But yes, you want to put it into your IRB so that you trigger an ancillary review. Okay, so ChatGPT is a large language model. And what this does is it works like a sophisticated word prediction game. So essentially, the way that these work is that it's doing calculations. It's not thinking, it's not understanding, but it's calculating if an answer based on the language that you're putting in, it predicts what the next human response would be using billions and billions and billions of examples of data. And again, I'm not an AI expert, but it's really realistic and you can have really good conversations back and forth. And it sure feels like it's thinking. But when you read about what ChatGPT is actually doing, it's just a bunch of statistical modeling and prediction tools based on the data that it's been trained on. All right, quick segue into the difference between accuracy and precision, which becomes really important when we think about coding. So remember that accuracy and precision are not the same thing. If you're going to look over here, let's say that the right answer, the truth with a capital T, is the bullseye in the middle. We've got 3 darts that are centered around the middle, but they're not quite on top of each other, but it's pretty close to the middle every time. So it's pretty accurate, but not necessarily as precise. It's not in the bullseye every time. Versus this one over here, you've got these 3 darts that are on top of each other and they're like boom, 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 very precise, same spot every time, but it's nowhere near the bullseye. So it's precise, but not accurate. And so what we would hope for our AI, if it was going to be coding data for us, that it's going to be both accurate and precise. So what can ChatGPT do for us? So yes, you can upload your transcripts to it and say, here's 10 transcripts. Can you give me a code book? And it'll spit out a code book. And then you can say, can you give me definitions for all of the codes and example quotes from my transcript? Yes, it can do that and it will do that. If you do that 10 times, you will get 10 different code books. And so the reproducibility of those findings is really important. And so in the research articles, as you're reading, if you choose to read these articles, you're going to notice that the researchers, in order to do this in a rigorous way, they're repeating their queries anywhere from 3 to 10 times. And most of them do 10 times because ChatGPT is not the same every time, albeit much like a human. If I may label it this way today and that way tomorrow, does that matter? Okay, so an example. So this is a paper, the Beaker, I think it's Beaker, paper. All of the papers that I reviewed were relatively new. Many of them were in preprint, so not peer reviewed, but this one was peer reviewed. And this was about their research question from another study was on blog posts and sugar consumption and looking to see how people alter their sugar consumptions in ways that they called mechanisms of change. So how are people talking about the way that they try to cut back on sugar in their diet? So they had 537 blog posts and they created 10 different code books using AI. There was a whole process that they went through of prompt engineering to get the right prompt and then picking the right data set and making sure that the humans agreed that the data was responsive to the prompt. I'm not presenting in all of that because it gets into the nitty-gritty. But what it found is that it was pretty precise. So when we got to the point of getting to a code book, it was pretty precise. So AI created a code book. They ran it 10 times. And then they asked AI to do coding and then they checked reliabilities. But important, when they checked reliabilities, they checked AI coder 1 versus AI coder 2. And so they weren't in this study. I'll show you another one, but in this one, it wasn't against humans. So this is their prompt. You will get a copy of all of these slides. Again, for time, I want to move past the prompt engineering, but this is a process that we shouldn't underestimate. It's not that you just sort of like type it in and tell it to go. In rigorous research in this area, they're often honing the prompts multiple times, creating it, testing it, recreating it, changing it. But eventually what they came out with in this one was this particular prompt that says, for each post, please extract all the mechanisms, strategies, or techniques for reducing sugar consumption in a brief and concise manner, up to 10 words. And then it gave it some instructions about output to make it into an Excel sheet. And so they ran 10 code books, and they found a whole slew of mechanisms that AI then, in a step before, they found all these mechanisms that then honed into these categories. And that's what I'm showing you here is the final code book. And you can see the 10 versions of the code book here. And what's really interesting to me is that some of the code books had 10 categories, right? Those big bucket things, 10 buckets. Some had 5, some had 6. It just depended on which version of, I open a new chat window and it's a new code book. This one's got 9. I open a new chat window, the new code book, this one's got 5. So what they did is they had humans review all of the code books, not create their own code book, but they had the humans look at the code book and say, does this look right based on the data that you're reading? And so they would agree with the codes that the AI came up with, or they would disagree with them. And remember, that is really different than human independently thinking and coming up with their own codes. This was just sort of agreeing on it. And what they found is that for the most part, the humans were like, yeah, this makes sense, sounds good. And so their intercoder agreement, based on the human review of the AI's codes, were pretty high across the board. We usually look for 0.65 or higher to show a sign of inter-rater reliability. And so this is looking pretty darn good. So this is good. And so what they ended up doing is picking the code book to move to the next phase of analysis that had the highest kappa. But again, remember, you've got this one here that's at a 0.8 or a 0.79 of inter-rater reliability, and this code book only has 5 categories, and this code book has 10 categories. So the obvious question is, okay, it's very precise, but is it accurate? Are there 5 or are there 10? There's got to be either 5 or 10. I mean, maybe there's 9 versus 10. Maybe you could argue 7 versus 10, but 5 versus 10, or even down here, 13, starts to get a little bit wonky, in my opinion. So again, their kappa was AI versus AI, and they're still not necessarily looking at accuracy. This is what the code book looked like. This is in the appendix of the article. And you can see when they did the coding, they had high kappas. So when the AI used the AI generated code book to code the data on which it generated the code book, it had high inter-rater reliability. And you can see this here. So it seemed to do a pretty good job. But here's the thing, nowhere in the paper do I get to see where the AI coded this piece of text to this particular code. It's really just about whether it looked good. It wasn't necessarily whether it's accurate. And so the conclusions for this one is that, like I said, the number of categories was highly variable. They compared 10 AI coders to each other. They had good high kappas in inductive coding, where you're sort of generating the codes and categories out of the data. But when you use a deductive coding, which is applying a framework, the kappas were even worse. So I'm only talking about inductive coding because AI does not do as good a job with deductive coding. The study also demonstrates that while codebook development is consistent, it's the coding is also consistent across runs. And that's what we mean in that code book where they had really good kappas. Every time they ran the data, it was consistently coding the same stuff or the same concepts to the same blog posts. So those kappas, but it did not compare to human coders, even though they had human coders reviewing. That was not really comparing it to human AI coding, and the authors acknowledged that. It also didn't check any validity or accuracy of the codes, just whether it was reliable and whether it was present or absent. And the other thing that was interesting in this is that they did find areas of hallucinations, which is when AI just sort of makes stuff up. So there would be a couple, this is why they had to have humans review it, there would be a couple categories where it would say like, uncertain prognosis would be a code. And that was just like a word that came up, or it was made up. It didn't make any sense. And so the humans threw that one out. So there were definitely hallucinations found, codes in the code book that were created that didn't belong there, but they didn't report the frequency of that. And then last is that this was blog posts. So these are small chunks of data for the most part. Interview data, which is more of a conversation, and focus groups is very, very different. Okay, so the next article,
Laura, sorry.
Okay.
There's a question which I think is better answered now
Okay.
before you move on to the other study. So there's a question that says, was the implicit assumption that human coding was the gold standard?
Yeah, that's a great question, Nancy. Yes, I think for the most part, those in the field, we say that the human coding would be the gold standard for sure. And I'll show you, I'll show you, I can show you some examples um, from my own work where the AI just clearly misses it. And I actually had one of the examples in the talk already. Actually, I just remembered I presented that. So yeah, I think that I would be very reticent to say that AI is going to give the gold standard. Not to mention, I'm not going into all of the ethics and the potential biases that AI brings from its training data set. Yeah. Oh, she's glad. Okay, good. Yeah, no, AI is not the gold standard. Um,
Sorry, can I just
mhm.
really quick measurement kind of question? Um,
I'll do my best.
well, they use like this metric that they're using of do the raters agree?
Yes.
Uh, how, how does that show? Like I haven't seen that used in human to human comparisons.
Mhm.
Like does that show up a lot in human to human comparisons? And what do the numbers look like in that? Like if you do that rather than, the usual process is you have two people doing the coding, and then
Yep.
you do some kinds of consensus or whatever to. How does it work if you just like, is this right?
Yeah, so there's different standards in different fields of qualitative. In my area, I don't even want to say my area, even within my area, there's probably, but in the circles that I flow in, we always use inter-rater reliabilities or Cohen's kappa in human-to-human coding. So our value is 0.65 or zero point 0.7, depending on how complicated your code book is. You want your human coders to always be at 0.7 before you sort of code the rest of the data. So you want to make sure that your code book is such that if two different humans are coding, you run that statistic. It's available in MaxQt. It's available in all the softwares. And you want to make sure that you hit that before you go. So the AI
But
to AI is also, go ahead.
but the human to AI, wasn't there a human to AI step where they picked the coding?
Yes,
That's the one. Sorry, it was a while back, but
yeah, no, that's okay. I actually am going to show some more data with human to AI coding, but yes, they weren't and by the way, this paper was written in a different country, and so some of the semantics and language and terminology about what's a code, what's a category, what's a meaning unit, is real fuzzy, to be honest. I read that paper like maybe 10 times to understand it. But I think that the humans were just saying, yeah, that code is there. I see the AI said uncertain disease. Yes, it's there. Click, I'm done. It didn't like, they didn't do interpretation. So I wouldn't call it human coding, and neither did they.
okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so the next study I'm going to do much less in depth, and actually this will help you answer. I'm going to show a little bit more about what agreement means versus kappa. And so the interview data was the next question, right? So I had said, this was a survey and it's like usually small little blips, but when you get into an interview, it's really more complicated. So this paper focused on interviews, and it was interviews about urologic diseases in men, like uh, uh-oh, what's going on here? Okay. So here they did do human to AI coding. So the process that they used was different. And so again, different researchers, different process, lack of standardization across the field, kind of a problem. So, but what they did here is they took transcripts. They had 20 interviews and they asked the AI to say, you're a researcher, do some coding for me. Come up with the codes and give me example quotes. And I think they asked for some definitions. And they ran it through all 20 interviews. And then they went through a refinement period where they said, okay, I want more detail, make it more descriptive, give me separate quote. They asked it to go deeper, deeper, deeper. And so they did that 20 times for each interview. And then they said, okay, now for interview number 1, you have all the codes that you've given me. Now give me themes. So they'd have all their themes for interview 1, and then they do the same process. All their themes for interview 2, process. All their themes for interview 3. And then at the end, they took just the themes and pulled them together and said, okay, now pull all these themes together and pop out my results for lack. So it's a lack of better phrasing. So this was basically the process that they did. And then the AI themes were refined by humans. So again, no human coding, but they were sort of checking to see if the humans agreed with the themes that were um, in the data that the AI came up with. Okay. So let's take a look here. So this, by the way, they did have human codes from another study. So they did do a little bit of comparison of old human codes versus the GPT codes. And so what's really interesting here, so for example, and I don't know what these interviews were really about per se, but they were urinary, like men's mental or men's sexual and urinary health. And it was looking at the humans between spray or stream. So there were some themes about urinary issues with spray or stream, I assume of urine. And the humans found that code 12 times, the AI found that code 7 times. And you can see that there are differences in the frequencies from the AI to the human, just eyeballing it, and that there's a whole slew of codes here that the AI did not find, but that the humans did find. And similarly, a bunch of codes that the AI did find that the human didn't find. So there's different codes, there's different frequencies, it's just different. And that's okay. That's true of human coding as well, but just important to note. So then what they did is they took the final themes that had kind of come out of all of these interviews and they put it together in this agreement matrix. And I will explain it in a moment. Well, I'll explain it right now. So let's start here. AI, this is blue coding. And so they call these themes, let's pretend they could be codes, they could be themes. It doesn't really matter. But for the to stay consistent with the article, they're saying that these themes on sex issues, urinary issues, mental health issues, they're basically collapsing all the codes into what they're calling a theme. Because I wouldn't say sex issues in and of itself is a theme. Like that's not descriptive to me. That's just a topic. But nevertheless, so the AI in interview one, number one here, found, yes, in fact, there was discussion of sex issues as according to the definition in interview one. So it's blue. And the human found it too. The human thought the same thing. And so it's yellow. And so over here in the agreement matrix, they've highlighted it as green, showing that the human and the AI agree with each other. So you can look across this and you say, oh, wow, look at that. There's a lot of green on this agreement matrix, which is fabulous. So there's some areas where the human found the code or the theme, but the AI did not. And that's the yellow areas. You can see there's quite a few of those. And then there's a few that the AI found that the humans didn't find. So how do we interpret that? Well, the other thing I want to call your attention to is interview number 7. So if I look over here at interview number 7 and I look at sex issues, and what this AI is saying is, nope, that was not part of the conversation. And the human says, nope, that was not part of the conversation. So the absence of the code, they agreed on the absence of the code, which is a low bar, right? And so that turns up green in your agreement matrix. So this is why I have a problem. And this is why we generally don't use measures of agreement in our reporting of qualitative data, because it often will incorporate these, areas of non-coding. So no, you didn't talk about coffee. And I agree, you didn't talk about coffee. That's really not that hard to agree on. So that to me is kind of useless. But when they ran the Cohen's kappa, which is the statistic we are talking about, where it considers agreement occurring not just by chance, then it drops pretty darn low to 0.41. So the agreement is not the same thing as accuracy. And the Cohen's kappa is sort of is a little more of a rigorous approach to whether or not the same codes are being coded to the same area. The other thing in this study, well, actually, let me move on. So again, humans identified more subthemes and more complexity. GPT was missing more subtle codes, which is these two themes are every paper I've read, it's the same thing. Humans are getting more depth, humans are getting more context, humans are getting more complex themes. GPT, it's sort of consistent, but when you look at the kappas, they're really not that good. So in the next one, this is also interviews, but again, different process. Instead of feeding GPT the whole transcript, it instead it processed it in what they call dialogue filtering. So instead of just going, here's a transcript, go, it said, here's question number 1 and the answer to question number 1, and they copy that into a spreadsheet. And here's question number 2 and the answer to question number 2, and they copy that into a spreadsheet, and then, so on and so forth. So it's not just sort of a free-for-all, but it has a little bit more structure. And the question, of course, is whether or not that is useful for AI to do sort of a better job. Also want to point out that this is still under preprint. So that be what it meant. So then they did the dialogue filtering, and then they asked it to do the coding. And what you can see is that it was pretty accurate. So here, accurate meaning that the humans, when they looked at the codes, they were like, yep, it's there. Yep, it's there. Yep, it's there. And so for accuracy was greater than 90% for 13 of the 18 questions. And again, not is it right, but just is it there? Is it present or absent in the code? But not is it contextualized correctly? Just is it there? So think back to the uncertain disease code I showed you earlier. Yes, it's there, but it's the wrong code. So, but nevertheless, it's very accurate. When you look at consistency rate, and note this is a preprint, and they labeled this as accuracy. I'm 99.9% sure after 100 different reads that they mean for this to be consistency and for this to be consistency. So this is the consistency rate, and what this shows is that there was not consistent coding. So same code to the same piece of dialogue. So same code to the same text. Was it consistent with what the humans agreed? No. And so it was pretty variable across that. All right, so I'm about to head into, I have one more quick thing here, and this is from my own research, before I head into the pros and cons and sort of conclusions. So I was reading all these papers and I was playing with AI and I was like, can I just like pop in some transcripts and say, give me some themes? So that's what I did. And I, sort of engineered this prompt, which is not perfect, but whatever, it's good enough. So I uploaded some transcripts and I said, imagine you're a rigorous qualitative researcher, conduct a thematic analysis to answer my research question, give me themes and example quotes to support each theme. And here's what it gave me. And, I'm not going to read this to you, but this was the output. And it was pretty good. It gave me the theme. It gave me some description. It gave me some quotes that when you read these quotes, it relates to the theme. Looks really nice. So I thought, okay, this is good. But then I was like, I want to check it. How can I audit this? How can I go back and make sure that the context is right and that I want to see what it did. I want to look underneath. And that is the inherent problem in GPT right now. So when I ask it, I said, okay, give me codes, give me the definitions of the codes, give me where you found it, et cetera, et cetera. This is what it gives me. And I tried this a million different ways, but you can see it's like very, very superficial. What it's giving you. It's not giving you that rich look where you can point into the transcript and look what comes before and look what comes after. It's just really, really difficult to check it because as we know, AI does a lot of hallucinations. So this was, concerning to me, even though when I look at these themes and I know this data super well, like these themes are pretty spot on from stuff that I've done in the past and seem really appropriate. So in conclusion for the GPT section is what do I think about it? So I do think it's consistent and it's precise. The kappas are good. It's consistent with itself most of the time. It's extraordinarily fast, making it extraordinarily tempting to use. The codes are very general. They give you a starting point. I certainly wouldn't rely on it. And again, the kappas are pretty good, but as soon as you start doing real human coding versus real AI coding, the kappas start to get lower. It's a lot of work. And so it's very fast. To me, I'm sure it will save time in the long run, but certainly the upfront time, I'm just like, I could have made a code book in the time it was taking me to get this export in the correct format. So I'm not so convinced that it's a good use of code booking, using GPT to make code books because it does require so much checking. And again, the fact that you can't go in and look at the coding is really problematic for rigor and audit trail to show what codes are assigned to what dialogue and where in the transcript. That is just stuff that the software can do, but GPT does not export currently. Stay tuned on that. GPT does not import directly into MaxQDA. You cannot make an output to import it into PDA. And I know that to be true because I've spoken with MaxQDA about it. And we're working on a workaround. Okay, a couple other studies, just honorable mentions, not going to go in detail, but if you're interested in this area, this is a study that Rob Lennon and I and some colleagues, Chris Griffin and Robbie Fraley up at ARL and main campus have worked on using clustering. These are not word clouds, by the way. Repeat, they are not word clouds. But what they do is Aqua is a AI tool that Robbie and Chris have from other work that they've done, and we applied it into qualitative analysis. And this was a couple years ago that this paper came out. And I'm delighted to see it cited in a lot of the AI literature now. And what it's showing is that AI did do a very good job of clustering topics. So it would take all of the things that were talked about in this huge data set that we had, and it put them into the appropriate clusters so that humans could go in and look at them and theme straight from those clusters. And we did human comparison and AI comparison. It was pretty accurate at a high level. Once we looked at nuance, AI does not do well, but it was very good for the high level, easy to find codes. So Aqua is another tool. Another great study was this one on NLP. It was a crossover trial by Tim Gutterman, who was looking at, is it better to use, Tim is of a big feeling, as am I, that, it's all about process and that AI should be augmenting the humans, not the humans just clicking the button and letting AI go. So his research question was, is it NLP versus human, NLP and then human, or human and then NLP? And each approach was pretty consistent, and I'll let you read that study. All right, so getting down to the wire and the end points. If you pay attention to nothing else, this is what you should hopefully take away. So remember back to my early slide about what makes for rigorous qualitative data. And the question is, does AI meet the challenge? And so we talked about multiple perspectives. You can have a lot of different AI perspectives. You can have human perspectives. So yes, I think that it meets the standard of having multiple perspectives, because you can have the AI code it several times. You can have different humans code it, and it just adds. Inter-rater reliability, I think the answer is yes. When it's AI versus AI, when it's human versus AI, it's not as good. But if you're looking to do high-level coding across a very simple code book, it's actually pretty reliable. Again, not sure whether or not they're accurate, but it certainly is reliable. Checking the context and confirming the coding. I've not seen any ability to do that with GPT-based AIs, or even really with Aqua or any of the other AI platforms. So it's certainly not able to do that. And of course, our team and probably lots of people all over the world are working on ways to get around that and figure that out. Rich description, I've not seen AI meet that standard for me. The descriptions I showed you earlier on are very brief. You have to sort of keep asking it to go deeper and deeper and deeper. And it just, in my opinion, misses the context and the depth of coding. And certainly there's no ability for audit trails. So what can we use it for? I'm not by any means saying not to use it. I'm a huge proponent of AI. I use it all the time. It can and will do almost anything you ask. And so that's what's really, I think, dangerous about it. The question you need to ask yourself is, will it be right? So again, it's fast, it's accurate, it's great for pilot results, for peeking at your data. That Word document that I showed you, where I just plopped in some transcript and used it for themes, I needed some quick pilot data for a grant submission that was going in, and we threw it in there, and I read the themes, and then I read a bunch of transcripts, and I was like, yeah, this is meeting my sniff test, and I threw it into my grant. So it was really, really useful for that. Student abstracts, I'm using it. Even national abstracts, I would use it for. So I think that some of the fastness of it really helps us to get our work out there, make impact without being a slave to the rigor and the time that it takes to do really good research. And again, the quick skim checks seem okay to me. It's inexpensive. But questions, and I already talked about all of the cons. The questions that I have are, how does it generate themes? We can't see what's behind the black box. How common are these hallucinations? We know that they're existing, but we don't know how common they are. And importantly, is not just common, but how harmful are they? How egregious are the hallucinations? If they make a quick little mistake, and since I don't have time, I'm going to skip the example, but not all hallucinations are bad. And then again, we really need to know what is the process. Every research team that I've read has been using ChatGPT in a different way, and we really need to standardize that. Thinking about ethics and of course work checking. But here's the thing. The thing is that when I do that sniff test, it's really not that different. And like I said, I've been using it for grants and abstracts. I think that we as researchers need to be really diligent and not lazy and maintain rigor. Because in the end of the day, what I am thinking to myself as right now, April 2025, shortcuts are shortcuts. And I know I spend a lot of time collecting my data, and I think that it deserves more than that. So this is what our lab is using as of today, our lab standard. And I say that as of today, it could change next week. I have a meeting. I hope it's going to change, but we'll see. I think the main thing people are looking for AI to do is code their data. And so AI Assist offers, it sort of tots that it can code your data. I do not think that it's worth the amount of work and the amount of checking it would need to take to really feel confident with that. I don't think GPT can code data, even though there are papers that say that it can. I hope I showed you that there's a lot of problems with it and we don't really know what's happening. It's within this audit trail. But that's not to say that I wouldn't use GPT, like I said, for quick, fast looks, peeks at data's grants. And I personally would not publish unless human coded. I've not reviewed any papers on AI qualitative work. And again, what I need to see is the audit trail integrated into software in order to make the leap. But I believe that it's going to happen very soon. I just don't believe that it's there yet. So that is my full assessment, and I am thank you for your attention and open for questions.
Thank you. There are a few questions in the chat, starting from Ligia Rees, who is asking, so it says, I'm curious about the references for the 0.65, 0.7 range on agreement in qualitative. Usually defaults to the pattern and max serve as my points of reference.
I think there's different publications. 0.65 to 0.7 is sort of the rigor that I typically look for, and I think is like the moderate to high level. You can set your standard at whatever. It's just whether or not your reviewers are going to agree. I don't know Patton and Maxwell, but I do know that there's a lot of papers out there, and some of the ones that I cited have ranges. 0.4 to 0.6 is moderate, and 0.6 to point whatever is, so yeah.
And Candice is asking, with the non-zero chance of hallucination, do you think that entirely discredits all the work AI is capable of? And what kind of work would we need to see to be able to check the work for rigor?
Yeah, that's a great question, Candace. No, definitely not. And that's sort of what I was trying to get at with the harmful hallucination. So I'll just really quickly, since you asked, I'll tell you this. Gosh, where did I see this? Oh, I saw it at the ACTS conference, the CTSI conference I was just at, where they were talking about hallucinations in laypersons' abstracts. And what they said in this, what AI wrote was that participants were randomized to half the participants got the control and half the participants got the intervention. And in fact, that was what AI said based on a scientific abstract, but that wasn't right because it was a 2-to-1 randomization. So 2/3 got the intervention and 1/3 got the control. So for a lay person, does it really matter that half, it really was half and half instead of two? It's sort of not harmful for the gist of it. It's not correct. It's wrong, but it's not harmful. So I think that the degree of hallucination matters. And I think the ability for us to be able to check our work in Max QDA or something similar, I think is really, really important.
There are two questions from Jonathan. I'm going to combine those two. It says, have you tried deep research, which recently came out? And the other one is sort of asking, how much better would the depth be if you trained an assistant or an agent?
I'm not sure. You mean like an agent, like creating your own GPT? Is that what you mean, Jonathan?
OpenAI has the ability to create assistants that basically you're developing the RAG pipeline that would augment your queries, and you could train it on how to do basic thematic analysis from whatever perspective you wanted it to be. I'm curious of how much better it might perform at getting the level of depth that you are looking for.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. And certainly, I would imagine there are labs across the country that are doing just that. I will say a paper that I should have put as honorable mention that is from Penn State. There's something called qualitative, where I think they did just that, where they used a RAG-based program and used it, and they had good findings. I think it was in preprint as well. And I don't know the answer because I've not read any like formal papers on that, but I imagine that it's going to get much, much better when people pay attention. And I think this early GPT work that people are, laypersons such as myself are doing, I think is important to point out the problems. And then I think the very smart AI programmers are gonna solve our problems that we discover. So thank you for those questions.
All right, there are sort of lot of agreements from Nancy and Heather in some of the conclusions that you made. If anyone else has questions, I think it's just you can unmute yourselves and ask this point, which would make it easier. We're also right on time, so.
Well, good, because I also have a sore throat.
All right, thank you very much. It was a great talk, and
Thank
I think
you.
it's a very exciting topic. So thank you. We
Thank
appreciate it
you.
a lot.
All right, take care.
All right, thanks. Bye. Thank you, everyone.